Yes. Okay, then like to before we go into tonight's and study. Okay, I'd like to take a bit of time to recap and summary of last week's session. Recap of extra one, chapter one. Okay, basically what we have is that Israel, which is also known as Ephraim, and the northern kingdom, made of the 12 tribes that broke away from Solomon's son Rehoboam by Jeroboam and developed as the nation of Israel. They were then taken into exile and conquered by the Assyrians in 722 BC. All right, it should serve as a warning, and the prophets use it as a warning to warn the southern kingdom that the same fate will then will overtake them if they do not repent and do not get their right and life right and things of that sort. Okay, then Judah, the southern kingdom, the two tribes as Judah and Benjamin, basically, and they were taken into exile in three successive and times 605, then this is the time probably Daniel and his three friends were taken into exile. Then 597, and Jehoiakim and Joachim was taken into exile, and the king. And then in 587, and when the puppet and Joachim's uncle Zedekiah rebelled against the Babylonians, he and the Babylonians came and uh, uh, destroyed Jerusalem and then took Zedekiah into exile, blinded him, and he died there. Okay, Joachim and later was treated pretty well and a prisoner, basically as a royal prisoner, and released from prison and given some kind of what we call pension, so to speak, and he and was allowed to continue his life in Babylon. Then about and the prophet says that Jeremiah says that you will be in exile for 70 years, but less than 70 years, 50 some years later on, 538, Cyrus, the Persian, then they defeated the Medes and become the king of the Media and Persian Empire. Cyrus was the king of Anshan and the smaller of the two, then the Persian kingdoms, and united the kingdoms together, defeated the Media, and then defeated all the rest, and defeated and finally conquered Babylon. And in the process, he allowed the Jews, when he conquered Babylon, and Babylon became king and become basically the emperor and the king of kings, so to speak. And he basically was not called King of Persia at that time. I don't think that he was called. Basically, King of Persia is too small. He's not even called the King of Babylon. He's called the King of Assyria because Assyria was the original kingdom, original empire. And that comes to play a bit later on and in our study. So he to proclaim an edict that is quite remarkable during his days to allow the captive populations return to their homes and rebuild their temples and restitution. The UN and the modern and historians call this the first first document of human rights. And so the Jews were allowed to return in 538 BC. However, not all Jews returned, and the 50 or so more years that they were there, or some are longer, and some of them are able to, taking the advice of Jeremiah, to settle down in the city and to plant and some of them become very well rooted in Babylon, and they are second generation, and they make profit, and they are well. People like Nehemiah then became part of the royal household. Daniel, then we find that he has a place in the royal and administration. There are many in a non-royal situation. They make wealth and they see no reason to return to a devastated land, devastated home, where they have to start all over again. So the majority did not return, and most of them remain in Babylon. But significant number of Jews did return. Okay, and they were led by Shashbazzar the first, and Bazzar, and not Ezra. He was the leader of this first group of pioneers who returned back. Cyrus only went back, and some, and probably some 80, 90 years later on. Okay. Cyrus then also at that time returned some of this temple sacred items, basically the bowls, the cups, the dishes, and whatever that were taken by the Babylonian exile, returned them and gave it to Shashbazzar, and went back. So the returnees were also helped by those who remained, and Cyrus encouraged the people who remained to help those who are going back. And also, you find that some of the neighbors who were not Jews also helped them. And this reminds our author, our narrator, as this is just as the Egyptians helped the Jews, the Israelites leave Egypt, and by giving them silver, gold, and all kinds of things. So you have some kind of like a second Exodus. So that was the reason why I chose the Exodus song and for this evening. All right. So this is a basic summary and of what we have. Uh, what does it? What spiritual lessons can we learn from that? And well, I think that and one of the lessons is that God is in control, and this event of the Jews returning back to the homeland is probably very insignificant. I think as far as the Persians are concerned, the Babylonians are concerned, it's not a big thing. It is part of a cult and Cyrus, a foreign policy. He feels that it is much easier. He has changed the way that the Babylonians, Assyrians, and governed the empire. And maybe he learned some lessons. If you subject people to harsh treatment, they are not so loyal to you. So if he can and return them, then he didn't experience some kind of conversion to worship the Lord and the Jewish God, and the language of the edict that was given, and the Lord commanded me to build him a temple. That is basically diplomatic language. In the then Cyrus and Cylons of Cyrus, more clearly his own language. He worshipped Marduk, the Babylonian god, and so yeah, and Marduk is the one who is his chief god, and but he's a polytheist, so he believed all the other gods as well. So he returned them and asked the other gods to pray to Marduk for his blessing. So, as far as it's concerned, he has his own aims, his own objectives, his own reasons for doing what it is. But for those who are those who are what we call the people of God, we see the providential hand of God, to say, and we can say this lesson also today. And sometimes we Christians, we are so insignificant. We are what we call the minority. We don't see. We are not basically world influencers. But with the eyes of faith, we can sometimes see the hand of God. For example, China. Uh, when China opened up and to the world, and it is not to let Christians go in, it's not to let missionaries go in and things like that. And China want to basically get into the modern world, and they have their own. By being there, they have to open up their doors, and which is something that they are probably loath to do. And but they want to prosper economically and politically, they have to do so. In the process, we find that Christians found the opportunity for evangelism in China. And so we see as a providential hand of God. And even though from the Chinese authorities and the what we call the power in China, that's not their purpose. But we see how God can open different doors and different things, and through the designs of human beings that is not in line with God's design. And so we can see how God can open doors for us. Even in the country, in Malaysia, we can see it. And if you have eyes of faith, God works in mysterious ways. All right. So that is probably the spiritual lesson that we can learn from there. All right. So now we come to chapter 2. Okay, the chapter 2 is about and is I think I put into WhatsApp message to the group. Some say this is a very boring, and all a lot of whole list of names, and but it's important. And but however, there are some things that we need to note. After chapter 1, if we go to chapter 2, it looks like just a easy continuation. But most likely, the author, who is writing many years later, has merged the early chapter 1 and chapter 2, and which probably covered and probably some years, and I presented it as a single return. And the biblical writer is not trying to give you history. The biblical writer is trying to give you a theological lesson. And so sometimes, and matters of chronology, matters of exact historical details is not the main concern that he has. So he can merge all the various, probably throughout the years, and when Sheshbazzar returned, maybe a couple of years later, another good return, another good return, and another good return. But the important thing is that he is the first one to return. Then later on, Ezra is returned, and probably Zerubbabel, and was another probably an important person who led the return. And so here we have a list of the returnees in chapter 2. This list seems to reflect a series of returns in a relatively early period in post-exilic community. We are basically given a literary condensed presentation of a protracted history. This is my view, and well, that is not a traditional view. That is the traditional evangelical view. Chapter 2 is exactly all the people that return with and Sheshbazzar, and that could be right. But I think that the list gives evidence that there are more than one return between and the first return and Ezra, and when he led the return later on, about many years later. Okay. So this is my understanding of chapter 2. Okay, you can accept it or you can reject it. You can think that it is basically the all right. One single return is fine. All right. You see where it's coming from. Well, why was that a list? Okay. To bore us, then okay. The concern of this list is important, and that is a reason. Of course, the writer didn't tell us clearly, in clear terms, why he made that list. Probably the list came out to define the boundaries of the restored community and link them as a legitimate continuation of the pre-exilic people of God who has been exiled and still constituted the people of Israel. It goes back to the Exodus when Joshua then led the people into Israel, and there was detailed list of who the people are, what the leaders are, what they did, and where they're settled, and all that. And probably it is basically that kind of a thing. And to connect that the return is not just a bunch of people who returned and to rebuild a new state, but this basically a restoration of the people of God. And that list is structured in that particular way. We'll look at it in more detail when we see that. All right. So that's a very important because later on you'll find that when we come to the time of Israel, the time of the of Jewish nation, they are concerned who is actually part of the community, who are not. Samaritans are not. Okay, other people are not, and so they want to know who are the people of God. All right, and perhaps like today, and we're going to have Bethelites and a 50th anniversary. So we send invitations out to everybody, and we want to determine who were the original Bethelites, and we want to list them. And well, we can accept other people to come in and all that, but they are not the Bethelites. We have a list, and let's look at the list. We have about 50 names, and so the list is important, and the people there in the list, these are the people who were, and the original, not all of them were there, at the beginning when I started church, probably then Keelan and Jim and Atek and Linda. These are the original group. Many of them, Lawrence came in a bit later, and others came in a bit later. But these are the original Bethelites. All right, that come through different times. So this is important. The list who were original, who is actually Bethelites, who are non-Bethelites but members of His Sanctuary of Glory. Okay, all right, and that kind of give you that kind of comparison. Okay, and now you follow the names of the list, you find that it is a structured list. So first of all, there's a list of 12 leaders because there are 12 tribes. Then the order of list is lay families by descendants. They have ancestry, sons of who, and they are the sons of who and who. And if they're not, then they are people who from this region, from that city, from that town, from that village, and things like that. Then you have the priests, then the Levites, then the minor cultic officials. And so it's a very structured list. It's not a bunch of people. So there's basically a structured list of people that are important to come, okay? And then followed by notes of those who cannot establish their pedigree, those who cannot trace their ancestry. And then there's a concluding summary, and there are some brief notes that later on, okay? All right. Now, this same list in Ezra 2 is also found in Nehemiah chapter 7, interestingly. It's the same list. There are some variations, okay? It is not only found in Nehemiah, it is also found in First Ezra, which is in the Catholic Bible, and Protestant Bibles don't have it. First Ezra chapter 5, which is the Greek version. And now, scholars are not sure. You have two lists, they are almost identical. Are they a copy? Who copied who? Or are they copied from one original, and there's one original list, and Ezra-Nehemiah copied from that list? My view is that Nehemiah is most likely to be the original list. And there are some minor variations of names, but mostly in numbers. And then, interestingly, in the list, there are the totals are basically the same. And so in Ezra chapter 2, verse 64, 67, the whole company numbered 42,360. Nehemiah also said 42,360. Besides, there are 7,339 male and female servants, the same that they had also 2,200 male and female singers. Nehemiah has more, 245. Okay, they had 736 horses, 255 mules, 435 camels, 6,720 donkeys. This summary is almost identical except for the number of male and female singers. Okay, kind of interesting. All right. Okay. Now let's look at the text itself. Okay. All right. Okay. First of all, let me share this one. Okay. Now, after then, it almost like they came up from Jerusalem, and now these are the people of the province, and to me, there seems to be a break actually, and it is not directly continuous, and so it says now then conjunction, and this is a conjunction, and that is kind of a break, and in that. Okay, these are the people of the province, and most likely the province here is referring to Judah, which in the Palestine or in the Persian understanding is Yehud. It is not a satrap, and the Persians have satrapies. It is a province, a district. It is not a state, and it is not a major section because Judah is a very small comparison to the whole Persian Empire. So it is a small little district, and or sub-district, and so in Selangor they are different districts, there are sub-districts and things like that. There was a small district. So the province is this district who came from the captivity of exiles. whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and to Judah, each to their own town. This is a restoration. This is a very important phrase. Each to their own town. They are not come to exiles and they're taken down and then they're sent back and then you can live where you want to. Okay, they go back to their own town. They are restored back to Israel, and so the idea that went back to their own town is important. And they went back. Their life is disrupted. They go back to their own town. It is not a matter of what I call convenience or things like that, but it's a theological meaning. They are going back home to their town, okay, not just to the province. In company with Zerubbabel, Joshua, Nehemiah, Zariah, Leah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mitzpah, Bigvah, Rehum, and Baana. Ezra's list has only 11 names. If we look at the what we call the 10. Okay, let me now show you the other list. Okay, share. Wait, where am I? Okay, share. Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, no, this is paused. No. Okay, close this. Stop this sharing. Sorry. Now I have shared the other list. Oops, why am I having this problem? Okay, all right. Okay, here I put on the left side and okay. Verse 2, we have they came with Zerubbabel, Joshua, Nehemiah, Zariah, Reliah, and all that. And you'll find that there are only 11 names. Okay, most likely then one name was kind of left out and because maybe it dropped out accidentally, and Nahamani is the name that is in Nehemiah's list. So basically there are 12, and these are the most likely the leaders. They returned with Zerubbabel, Joshua. Zerubbabel is the governor, and Joshua is the high priest, and Nehemiah is not the Nehemiah. Then this Nehemiah come in much later. Mordecai is not the Esther Mordecai. You need to understand. Now, some of the names look familiar and maybe found in other parts of scripture, but these are common names. Just because you are James doesn't mean you are that James. Just because you are John doesn't mean that you are that John. And so, Hebrew names can refer to different people can have the same names. Okay, this is the group that they are the leaders that came back, and these names cannot be associated with the other names, and except for Zerubbabel and Joshua. Okay, so I'm using the ESV because ESV is more literal than the NIV. So I'm using so that basically I want to make the comparison. All right. One of the things that I said just now earlier is that there are differences in some of the names and some of the numbers. Okay. So you have what we call then instead of Sariah, you have Azariah. Instead of Reliah, you have Ramiah. You have Mispah, you have Misperet. Instead of Rehum, you have Nehum. Are there alternate names? And I see you are Nkoki, Elias, Aki. Maybe they are, but most likely the differences has to do with copying mistakes. Some of the Hebrew letters and looks the same, and there are errors in copying. All right. if you believe in inerrancy of scripture, I can't help you. And basically, this is mistakes that are made in copying. Okay, and all right. So then the next group of people after the leaders, these are so you can see that, and this is not what we call a simple list of people. This is a list of Israel. This is a list of Israel reconsidered after the exile. So one of the first things for Israel is that there are 12 tribes, there are 12 leaders. So there are 12 and the foundational leaders that are there. Then the next group of people are the people of Israel. Okay, the people of Israel are divided into two sections. Those who identify by ancestry, they are the sons of certain people, and then later on, then you'll find that and they are considered and people of the sons or the men of and places, and rather than so they identify by the places. Why some people are identified by the ancestry, and why some people are um, we don't really know. But one possible and very likely, and I find that attractive, is that uh, if you are an important person, if you are a wealthy person, then you can be say you are Yap Aloy, then son of the Yap Aloy, the Capitan, then so there is ancestry kind of say. So if you are important person, then you will have a kind of ancestry tree. But if you are not so important, maybe a poorer person, you are the Tan Akau from Klang, and or Chai Yun Ming from Penang. So maybe say now this is not proof. This is not and this is just a suggestion. This is just, but it makes sense. And so important people are identified by who are their ancestors, and people are not so important where they come from. Okay, so I think that is how I see it. And so you'll find that many of the names are the same, and the numbers are the same. Okay, you'll find that but some of the numbers are different. So here the sons of Ara, 775, 7652. Then you have Joab, and the sons of Joab, you have 280, 28112, here 2818. So let's go on. You'll find that I highlighted the differences. Some of the names are a bit different. For example, here is the sons of Bani, and this is son of Binui. Okay, again, and but the way they are done, some of them are in a different order, and things like that. Okay, all right, and you can see. I'm not going to go there. A very interesting that the sons of Gibar. Is this a personal name? Because in Nehemiah, it is son of Gibeon. Gibeon is a place. So, but the number is the same. So is this the last name of this first list, or is it the first name of the second list? A place or a person? Take your pick, okay? Then you have what we call the sons of Bethlehem, 132, the men of Netophah, and your Nehemiah list is put together because probably the places are very nearby, and all together you add up, then 130, 123, 156 there'll be 179, but here is 188. So this is in green, they are combined. So there are some then basically then Asmavet, okay, a place. Then Beth Asmavet, and so instead of what we call the Asmavet, the house of Asmavet. So that kind of a situation, okay. So Kiryat Arim, then you have that. So you have what we call then there are certain what we call names here, places that are not found in Nehemiah's list. So you have Magbish, you have Jericho. You won't find that list over this side. the sons of Nebo, and here is called the sons of the other Nebo, and so this is kind of different qualifications. All right, then we come to the last list of names, the son of Senea. The interesting thing about this is that this group is very big. All the rest is 95, 132, then 700, and perhaps, and that this is very example, but this is 3,630. This is a big group. On the other side is 3,930. So there's a cause a lot of what we call the debate among scholars as to what is this. Some things that this is not actually a place. This is basically the son of Senea is the either is that these are the people that are the what we call the untouchables. They are not just the lower income group; they are the lowest of lowest income group. Okay, so Senea, they are the despised, and so if you're they are the Bangladeshis, they'll put it that, and they are that. So you find that that makes a bit more sense, and because there's a very large group, and can't it could be, yeah, but rather unlikely, rather unusual. Then the next group are the priests. You find the priests almost exactly, and almost exactly is exactly the same. Probably in the copying of these names and all these things, greater care is taken to write down the priests because the priests are the most important people. And so you find that the priests exactly you have, and there are in the priesthood, there are what we call 24 classes, what we call orders of priests during David's time. They were put down in orders so that they take turns and to do the what we call the functions in the temple. And later on in just this time, there are also 24 and orders of priests. But in this first return, seemingly only 4 families returned. Which means most of the priests didn't come back. And it was also that what we call the number of priests that you will count them, they are about 1/10 of the population. Only about 1/10 of those who came back. So, and it says 1/10 who are priests, and so for every 10%, there's one priest, and so that is a kind of interesting idea. Later on, I think that it will evolve, and more priests comes, and then they develop into other houses as well. Okay. The Levites are those who help, so we call, and they are not a priest. They don't belong to the house of Aaron, and so they are not priests. That they are from the tribe of Levites. They are the priest assistants. They do what we call the cleaning of the and help the priest. They are the assistants. The interesting thing about the Levites is that they are much less than the priests. Many of the Levites didn't come back. Okay, which is kind of interesting, and because in the original what we call economy of in that the Levites outnumber the priest. So what we call the tithes and offerings and also are given to the tithes collected are given to the Levites, and the Levites give 1/10 to the priest. Okay, so the very idea that you have the Levites here, which are a very small number, and is unusual. Well, this is an academic and situation that some scholars think that the book the book of the law was written much later during the post-exilic period. But if it's written during the first exilic period, they would have dealt with this problem and make accordingly changes. But the very fact that the Levites are much smaller than the priests indicates that then the law was probably written during Moses' time, and that is If you don't understand what I'm saying, that's okay. Let's slide. Okay. Um, Later on, we'll find that when Ezra and tried to lead the people back, he could not find any Levites to come with him. He had to go and hunt them down. And even then, he only found very little. I think about 38 Levites, that was able to come back. And uh, see, the thing is that Levites didn't have property, and they are not allowed to own land. And so for the Levites to leave and Babylon and leave that and come to serve as Levites where they would not own land is going to be much more difficult for them. At least a priest and who doesn't live by the tithes and but also the offerings and all that, they will also then be able to do then more than that, right? Then you find that altogether the Levites and the sons of Joshua, Kadmiel, and the sons of Hodav and Hodeva, only 74 Levites came back. Okay. Then there are another group. Some of them think they are also Levites. In some texts, they are considered Levites. In other texts, they are not. And maybe later on, they are considered Levites. And you have the singers, or basically, I think NIV say the musicians rather than. So you have the sons of Asaph, the singers, the musicians, 128, 148. Then you have the gatekeepers, the security. They are the one who basically guard the temple and guard the storehouse and keep inventory. And they are 138, 39, here 138. Then there are the temple servants. Okay, this is interesting. The temple servants is the King James Version translated as Nitivim, the given. Most likely, you'll find that this group of people, if you know a little bit of Hebrew, then you'll find that many of the names are foreign names, not Hebrew names. Most likely, they are what we call foreigners, and they were captured as captives, and they were forced to serve in the temple and as what we call assistants and to the Levites, or even not even the assistants. They are the ones who are doing the most menial work, cleaning up and washing and things like that. And so they because the lowest kind of laborers, so to speak, and there are whole group of them that come back. So, and they are there. Then there are also the sons of Solomon's servants. During Solomon's time, he has also probably forced certain people, foreigners also probably, and because they are in Solomon's time, then they are the sons of Solomon's servants. They are probably the same as this earlier group are probably considered during David's time, the Solomon's servants during Solomon's time, and they are also what we call and some of these names are probably not actual names and of people. For example, you have Sopheret here, which is a feminine name, and this is Has-Sopheret. Has-Sopheret means the Sopheret, and Has is basically the definite article the, and so it is probably a guild kind of a thing, a union and of people, and so you have this group, and they are there. So, and they are all lumped up together with the temple servants and the sons of Solomon's servants. They are 392. So, okay. So you have all the legitimate, the leaders, those who are the upper middle class, those the lower middle class, and then the priests, then the Levites, then the singers, then the temple servants, then the sons of Solomon's servants, and things like that. Then there are those who came up. And these places, Tel Melah, Tel Hasha, Cherub, Adnah, Immer, are probably not places in Judea, or what we call in Judea, in Israel, but they are places in Babylon. They came from those places, and they could not prove their houses or their descent. They could not prove where they come from. They could not prove who are their parents, who are their ancestors. And so, or whether they actually belong to Israel, but they came along. And so these are the names of them. And so these are basically the 642. Okay. And also there are sons of we call the priest, and also who not what we call and verify themselves. And this sought their registration. It says, and among those who enrolled but not found there, and you are excluded from the priesthood as unclean. Okay. As for the lay people, they were allowed to join, but they could not prove the descent as long as they follow the law and all that. So basically, they are allowed, but the rule for the priest is much more strict because they are not allowed to act as priest, because the priesthood is a holy sacred thing. And in the Old Testament, when people who are not valid priests and try to do priestly duty, they're struck down by God and they die. All right, so the community very careful. They don't want to do this, and so they are not sure, and so they excluded from the priesthood as unclean, haram. Okay, and the governor, that is interesting, is not the high priest. Maybe the high priest is not what we called and constituted yet. The governor told them they are not a partake of the most holy priest until there should be a priest to consult the Urim and the Thummim. Or some will see this, unless there was an actual high priest who were able to consult the Thummim, Urim and Thummim. The Urim and Thummim is a kind of an interesting kind of thing. It's probably something that the high priest wear in his breastplate. It is like the lots, and we don't really know what it is. Maybe the idea of Urim had the letter of Alpha, Thummim had the Alpha, the letter of Tav, and one is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The Thummim has the and last letter of alphabet, and maybe is kind of a lots, and so then maybe the both sides with like the priest cast a lot, and one possibility is that if both are then Urim, then the answer is yes. If both are Thummim, then the answer is no. And if it's one Urim, then one Thummim, then the answer not we don't know. Okay, maybe try again. All right, maybe with that kind of a thing. That is speculation, but that's a scholarly and a guess, and so it is. So unless there's a priest who consult the Urim and Thummim, the only priest can consult is a high priest. So unless when there's a high priest who will be able to determine whether these are legitimate priests or these are not priests, and ask God for revelation, things like that. So you find that, and they are not to eat of the most holy food, because the holy food is for the priest. And then we come to the last section, and we have already read them. And the whole assembly was 42,360. Now, here's where the problem also, another problem. If you had taken the trouble to count all the numbers in the preceding list, they don't come to 42,360. The numbers are different, and they come to about 29,000, about 28,000, 29,000. So there is a missing and 12,000. Okay. What do we make of this? Some suggested that, well, they didn't count the women, they didn't count the children. But if you count the women and children, and 12,000 women and children seems to be a very small number, unless we are thinking that most of the people who are willing to come back are single people, and because maybe they have no ties and all that, and no families, and to bring the children in, so that is a possibility. But most likely, then the most popular and most common idea is that the lists were not meant to be what we call exhaustive, and their numbers, and basically it's a selective list, and so they're missing numbers, they're missing people, they are there. So that's most likely that is the kind of a situation. Okay. All right. Okay. Then we come to the heads of the family. When they came to the house of the Lord, that is Jerusalem, they made free will offerings and to the treasury, the work, 61,000 derricks of gold, which is about, and someone says about 500 pounds or 500 kilos, 5,000 minas of silver, that is about 3 tons, and 1,100 priestly garments. But here you find that it is different. Okay, here is a sum up. The governor gave 1,050 and things like that, and you find that the numbers don't match. Okay, and so that is kind of a situation. Okay, all right, then. Okay, let me now close this one. Let me open up. Okay, back to this one. Okay. Okay, we'll come to the end of this section. After they gave what we call, they're quite generous. In fact, as you look at what we call they had male, female slaves, the company. They have male and female singers. These are not the singers in the temple, because in the temple there's no female singers. These are probably what we call singers, and therefore and private entertainment. They are people who they are singers to sing, to play the music during the meal times and things like that, and so or events and they have, or parties that they have, and they have horses. Probably the horses are for the more wealthy people, the mules, and then for the less wealthy people, camels for the more wealthy people, donkeys for the more common people. So probably they were quite prosperous in that people who went there, and very likely you don't go then to back if you don't have some means to go back, and probably they also have, they were given gold and things like that from their neighbors and their friends and all that, so they are pretty well off. But 20 years later, when Haggai was preaching to them, and then and uh, and scolding them for not building, the situation seems that they were impoverished, and a series, years of bad harvests and things like that, and people lost most of their wealth, and so one of the reasons they didn't complete the temple is because of poverty, and of course Haggai didn't see that way. He sees his misplaced priorities. Okay, so anyway, the understanding is that they came back, they were quite well to do, but after a few years, and from harassment from the neighbors, and war, neighboring countries, and cut off, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And uh, so basically, they were quite wealthy. All right, that's what I'm saying. When they arrived at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of the family gave free will offerings and all that, and then okay, and then verse 70, the priests and the Levites and okay, settled in their own towns along with some other people, and the rest of Israelites settled in their towns. Doesn't seem to make sense. The Levites settled down and the rest in their towns, and most probably something is behind the RSV, and taken from the first Ezra. The priests, the Levites, and some of the people lived in Jerusalem and its vicinity. Makes sense, because the Levites, the priests and Levites have to do the temple worship. Okay, so this is not found what we call in the Hebrew text. This is found in the Greek text, and probably and its vicinity. the singers and gatekeepers and temple servants lived in their own towns, and all the Israelites lived in their towns. So basically, what has happened is that and the priesthood, the Levites, and some people, gatekeepers, and live in these towns nearby, and all Israel in their own towns. They probably are not very far away anyway, because Judea is quite a small place, and in that sense, okay. Oh, okay, and so this passage is not just a passage about a list of names without any significance. The list of names are important. Uh, it is important to the Jewish people because there is a structure, and there is what we call uh, to have a whole life of the community. There must be actual people there, and probably we can translate in the New Testament. We in the New Testament, the church is not just a bunch of people. There are church. God has some elders, some leaders, and some teachers, and some prophets, and some what we call. And then there are gifts that the Holy Spirit gives to different people. So not everybody's the same, but every people are different. And of course, and we are not talking about. But the principle is there. There is structure, there is order, and we find that already in the Old Testament in particular sense. So this is not a bunch of people that just came from Israel and start from scratch. This is a group of people that were punished by God, taken exile, and they were back reconstituted as the people of God. And of course, I think then on this is a theological aspect of it. On the what we call probably the very material and the very what we call, and when you go back to the land and you want to go back to your town and home and get what we call your property, you go to show and your credentials, your IC, and that this is your land. This is the land of your fathers. This is the land of that. So then you are not allowed to just go anywhere you want to, and you go back to your own property and things like that. So in that is a very physical, that a very natural kind of situation. And then so it serves as and basically there's also when they were challenged by now, when the people came back to Yehud or Judah, they didn't come back to what we call a place that's empty. There were other people there already. Okay, just as and Israelis went back, the Jews went back in 1948. There were Arabs there, and there was big contestation, and there's a fight until today over whose land it is. So then the governor come, the other say come and so who gave you permission to build here? Who gave you that? They have the proof. They are legitimate descendants, and they are legitimate, and they have to say this is our land, this is my land, and so the list provides that kind of a documentation, that kind of a proof, and especially later on when the governor asks you who gave you permission, they have to that list and becomes what we call an important and proof that they have the right to be there. All right. Okay. All right. 9:30. That's nice. And I wanted to go and look at chapter 3 because it continued actually chapter 3, 10. But I think we can stop here. Okay. All right. Any questions? And